At the end of July, Square Enix shut down 2 Dragon Quest mobile games. Dragon Quest Champions on July 30th, followed by Dragon Quest Keshi Keshi on July 31st, just 1 day later. That last one is the one I'm most upset about. I loved that game, but the problem is that these recent shutdowns have called a few things into question. You see, it seems like Square Enix is releasing and shutting down these games left and right, one after another. So is it even worth getting into these games if a shutdown is inevitably close? And what actually is the longevity of a Dragon Quest mobile game? Let's take a look at the history of the releases and shutdowns of Dragon Quest mobile games from the beginning. November 24th, 2010. The Dragon Quest Monsters franchise had the honour of having Dragon Quest's first foray into the mobile game market, with a now lost iApply game called Dragon Quest Monsters Wanted. iApply, not Android or iOS. What the hell is that? iApply, or Java on iMode, refers to a Java environment which facilitates the downloading and installing of Java-based applications, like games, on iMode-enabled devices. iMode being a successful internet service by NTT Docomo in Japan. Fitting that it would be Docomo to house Dragon Quest's first mobile game, considering that 3 years later they released the SH-01F, a Dragon Quest themed smartphone in 2013, the same year that Dragon Quest Monsters Wanted was ported to Android. The game was also released a year later on iOS in 2014. Monsters Wanted remained active until its eventual shutdown on April 16, 2017. That's 6 years, 4 months and 27 days. That's a respectable lifespan. But did that sort of longevity last? Actually, yes it did. Kind of. You see, on January 23rd, 2014, Dragon Quest Monsters Super Light released. They really focused on the Dragon Quest Monsters series early on, didn't they? This game marked the first Dragon Quest mobile game to release outside of Japan, with a Southeast Asian release on July 29th, 2015. Dragon Quest Monsters Super Light actually remained active and supported for a very long time, all the way through to 2024, this year. The game finally shut down on January 31st. That's just over 10 years of service. Now that's a pretty good run. In Japan, the Southeast Asian release died December 2016, just 17 months after its release. That's not a great start for the Dragon Quest franchise on mobile off of its home soil, but they gave it another shot, eventually. You see, it took quite a number of years for them to try again. So far, the franchise's mobile games have had huge amounts of success in Japan, and although only a single game was released, terrible success outside of Japan. So let's jump back to October 15th, 2015, when a game called Dragon Quest of the Stars released in Japan. And Dragon Quest of the Stars is actually the first mobile game that I'm going to mention that is still supported to this day. Again, spoilers, still supported in Japan. And it's still actually wildly popular with active fan events and a community around it. But as I said, eventually this game did leave Japan, with English global servers launching on February 25th, 2020. So 2015 to 2020. They didn't rush to take the plunge, did they? But after the failure and short lifespan of Dragon Quest Monsters Super Light outside Japan, this one just had to succeed, right? So what did it last? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? The worldwide English servers shut down just 16 months after their launch. That's shorter than Dragon Quest Monsters Super Light. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, but what about 3 times? Well, we won't find out yet, because the next 2 games just didn't release in the West. November 3rd, 2017, the Dragon Quest CCG Dragon Quest Rivals was released. Around that time I was deep into Blizzard Entertainment's Hearthstone, so I never played it, despite there being an active community translating the cards into English. Like I said, this game only released in Japan. The game shut down on July 5th, 2021. The shortest lifespan of any Dragon Quest mobile game in Japan so far. Despite never playing it, I still think that this game's shutdown is one of the franchise's biggest losses. A really good, active Dragon Quest CCG would be the best. I love card games, but alas, it was not meant to be. In my opinion, there are two distinct eras of Dragon Quest mobile games. And one game in particular, the next one I'm going to talk about, creates the dividing line between the two eras. We have all the ones I've mentioned in the top block. In the bottom block, things start to see a little bit of a change, and it's where the current reputation comes from. But the dividing line I'm talking about comes from Dragon Quest Walk. Now, Dragon Quest Walk is Square Enix, I suppose, answer to Pokemon Go. Japan constitutes roughly 50% of the geolocation game market, so it just makes sense that Square Enix would try and throw its hat into the ring. So they did. September 12th, 2019, Dragon Quest Walk released in Japan. Now, I've already mentioned that this game also did not release in the West, but it did release in Taiwan in March 2023, but that's very recent and the game's still ongoing. So until a little bit more time has passed and we can see if the game actually shuts down or survives, then we won't know how that fared. So I'm going to skip over that for now. But the reason I call this the dividing line, well, the game has been so wildly successful in Japan. The highest grossing geolocation game, massively outperforming even Pokemon Go by a wide margin. Any big company in the capitalistic world that we live in is going to see that and go, mobile games are where it's at. Now, this is only 2019. It's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. As I said, this is what I consider the dividing line. And then we enter the next era of Dragon Quest mobile games. The modern era of Dragon Quest mobile games. The next Dragon Quest game to release is my personal favourite. And yes, this is one we actually did get in the West. And I'm of course talking about Dragon Quest Tact. Dragon Quest Tact released worldwide in English in January 2021. And it, in my opinion, really filled a gap in the Dragon Quest franchise. Because the Dragon Quest franchise is sorely lacking, in my opinion, a really good tactics game. Now, Dragon Quest Tact would actually be the first time that a Dragon Quest mobile game would survive a reasonable amount of time outside Japan. In Japan, the game is still going strong. It's ongoing, there are events, new updates, it's going great. Unfortunately, on February 29th, 2024, again, this year seems to be the shutdown year for Dragon Quest mobile games. Dragon Quest Tact closed its worldwide servers. But still, that's over 3 years of active support and updates on a Dragon Quest mobile game outside Japan. That is pretty good. It's not optimal. You ideally want your mobile games to last a lot longer than that. But still, it's better than a span of time that still makes sense to count in months rather than years. There's nothing more annoying than going to play your favourite mobile game and just being met with errors of shutdown, sorry, server error. But that being a positive story of a Dragon Quest mobile game outside Japan, why do I lump this into the second era? Well, 4 Dragon Quest mobile games released post-Walk in 3 years. That's more than one mobile game per year. And while this is a positive story, the same cannot be said for the ones that followed. Historically, as we've explored, Dragon Quest mobile games in Japan have had quite healthy lifespans. But post the Walk dividing line, and it's too early to say for Dragon Quest Tact. The rest of the ones I'm going to talk about don't follow the same trend. In 2020, a modern anime adaptation of Dragon Quest The Adventure of Dai released. Now, I love the anime, and they decided, let's release a game to sort of coincide with this airing show. And this would be the first time, and only time, that a Dragon Quest mobile game would have a simultaneous worldwide release, releasing September 28th, 2021. The game then shut down worldwide in April 2023. Remember what I said about spans of time where it still makes sense to count in months rather than years? Yeah, well, that's one of those. And that includes the Japan release of the game. The game was gone just as quick as it released. So what's the point even starting the game? People will have spent money in that game. People will have played quite a lot of it if they enjoyed it. And this is the shortest amount of time that a Dragon Quest mobile game would be alive in Japan. But I mentioned that released in Japan in 2021, and in December 2021, so just a few months after the release of the Dragon Quest Adventure of Dai game, we got Dragon Quest Keshi Keshi. Now this is a game that was Japan only. It's just a match 3 puzzle game, but it's a lot of fun and it's a good take on the genre. And being a Japan-only game, history has shown us that apart from that last one, they've done well. They've lasted 7-10 years. Not this time. Now, don't get me wrong, it didn't die the next day or anything like that. We're not dealing with a Concorde here. I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. Keshi Keshi shut down July this year. July 31st. That's still less than 3 years. Now, maybe after 2 years, I wouldn't start using my month system anymore. But that's not long enough, and it's still one of the shorter lifespans, because they see the success of Dragon Quest Walk and they think, right, mobile game, and they're just half-baked. And even if they're not half-baked, you just can't release so many and expect people to keep up with all of them. But there's one last game I've not mentioned. If you're deep in the Dragon Quest franchise and you follow its releases, you probably have heard of Dragon Quest Champions, but if you're not incredibly deep in, you probably haven't. Dragon Quest Champions was, again, Japan only. They just ditched the West altogether, and it released on June 13th, 2023. Now that's so recent, you'd be forgiven for thinking, well, obviously this game is still supported and ongoing. I mean, it's only 2024. Nope, you'd be wrong. The most recent Dragon Quest game released on mobile released June 13th, 2023, and it shut down on July 30th, 2024. That is just over 1 year of service on a Japan-only game, the shortest lifespan of any. And Dragon Quest Champions was Dragon Quest's attempt at a mobile battle royale. It really feels like in this second era they went, let's get all the popular genres and release them all. We've got tactics, gacha, we've got match 3, we've got battle royale. They just went, quick, we need our fingers in every pie. Dragon Quest as a franchise does potentially really lend itself well to the mobile platform. Now, as I mentioned, mobile games aren't for everyone, but they are for a lot of people. Square Enix, if they're going to be making these mobile games, just put the phone down and really put time and effort into them before you release them. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing because it helps a great deal. And in the meantime, between this video and the next, I'm not going to be playing a Dragon Quest mobile game because as of right now, there are 0 Dragon Quest mobile games in the West. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.